Hey folks, and this week's tale is a tale of murderous intrigue which comes with a side order of mystery washed down with a liberal dose of local mob justice. This is a tale of murderous bloodlust that transports us to one particular location that we have actually touched on before here on the flip side. Now, I've opted to revisit this region as, since our initial story on it, it really did strike a nerve with me with regards to intrigue and fascination. Now, the Honey Island Swamp covers roughly 250 acres of festering and fetid waterways filled with swarms of vampire-like mosquitoes and numerous other predators. It's a place where an unknown three-toed Bigfoot-like monster is also said to prowl. Now, it's not a place that you want to find yourself alone after dark. But before we get into it, I'd like to say welcome one and all, and I would like to invite you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to the channel. When you do have a chance, please also scroll through the archives and find tales of murder, cold cases, paranormal activity and unexplained events. Tales of cryptids, aliens and folklore abound. So drag up a chair, grab a beverage of your choice and get the lowdown of some of the wild and at times saddening accounts of events through the ages. Please slap a like on the films you watch and be sure to hit that notifications bell so that you'll be notified as and when new content is available from yours truly. As is customary on the channel, I'd like to spend a couple of seconds here just to give a shout out to some of the newer subscribers of the channel. So a big old welcome goes out to, and I hope I get the pronunciation right, Mayebongwe Delamni, Adam Lafleur, Thomas J, Steve Fox, and maybe some Australian royalty in the presence of the Baron of Belocco. Welcome to you all. But without further ado, let's get into this week's story with a revisit to one of the spookiest places in North America. This is a tale of murder in the swamp here on the flip side. The Honey Island Swamp is found in the lower segment of the Pearl River Basin of Louisiana. Located between the East and West Pearl Rivers, it has, in its history, been said to have been the lair of river pirates, robbers, murderers, and all other forms of unsavoury characters. With a twisting myriad of waterways and dense vegetation, it's long been seen as a perfect place to hide, especially by the numerous moonshiners that are said to have operated from within the area. Now, it would be unfair to paint all of its inhabitants as ne'er-do-wells, but it has, in its history, been host to a number of high-profile entities. This is probably due to the proximity of its borders with the neighbouring state of Mississippi, and it gives, thus, a wider appeal to those who may be running from the law in either state. Murderous gangs, such as the infamous James Copeland gang, were also known to have used the swamp to evade detection and capture by law enforcement during their respective reigns of localised terror. Now, the aforementioned Copeland gang was no ragtag handful of shadow dwellers. This was a highly organised gang with about 60 members who would regularly engage in any activity that could make them an illicit buck or two. From livestock theft to smuggling, piracy and counterfeit goods, through to murder, slave theft and arson for hire, they were not the kind of people that you would want to run foul of. Ultimately, and much to the benefit of the local community, the gang was disbanded on October 30th, 1857, when its leader, James Copeland, at the age of just 34 years, was executed by hanging in Perry County, Mississippi. Now, in such a lawless land, it came as no surprise that there were killings and lynchings through the years, and they almost seemed to be run of the mill. But there was one incident that stood out from the rest. In 1920s Louisiana, most folks would engage in hunting. That said, most folks would stick to an area around their town or within their county where they were indeed known, but more importantly, where they knew the places to avoid. This wasn't the case when just 2 days before Christmas, on December 23, 1926, that two Department of Agriculture employees, two entomologists by the name of William Mingy and John McLenmore, decided to enter the Honey Island swamp to go boar hunting. Now, wild pigs in the area were plentiful and would have made for a hearty meal over the festive period for the families of both men. Having been warned about the darker nature of some of the residents of the local Honey Island swamp, warnings that the men took pretty much with a grain of salt. They shook them off as exaggerations, and they headed off in search of game and adventure in the early hours of that fateful day. Now, what happened over the course of the coming days and weeks has been pieced together by accounts recorded in personal diaries and from administrative records from law enforcement at the time. Now, it paints a story of an unforgiving region that offers refuge to some of the hardiest of the criminally minded fraternity. Having crossed the Pearl River south of Picayune, Mingy and McLemore found an abandoned shack some ways off of the main road on the Louisiana side of the river. Now, opting to use that as their base camp for their hunting trip, they spent the next few hours of the morning transporting all the goods that they'd had on their loaded onto their vehicle, transporting all of those to the shack. Now, given the ground was so soft, it wouldn't have supported the weight of the vehicle even if it just had the two men in it. Thus, they had to schlep everything over to the shack. And in doing so, working up a sweat, the truck was eventually empty. All that remained were the weapons of the two men that they had left in the flatbed. Given that they had established the lack of any immediate and visible risk, they opted to leave their weapons in the truck until they'd shifted all of their supplies into what was intended to be their ramshackle base of operations for the coming few days. Now, with that task complete, the two men were sat cleaning their weapons around the flatbed of their truck when a shot rang out. Struck by a clean headshot, the lifeless body of McLemore dropped to the ground. He never even heard the shot ring out. Reacting to the ambush, Mingy, who had been assembling his rifle just a few meters away from his friend, scrambled to try and get to his friend to see if there was anything that he could do. But as he reached his fallen buddy, he looked down in utter shock as his chest erupted with buckshot, and his wounded body was thrown unceremoniously onto the ground in a twisted pile on the dank and cold swampy earth. As consciousness started to fade out from his body, all he could make out was the raggedy form of their assailant approaching the vehicle and to the spot where he lay. All he could make out was the silhouette of someone crouching over him, backlit by the sun, as darkness enveloped his body. He slipped into death, the last breath silently escaping his body. Now, within just a few short minutes, anything of value from both the bodies and from within the shack had been loaded into the truck, and the assailant made good his escape. With no witnesses, the killer smiled to himself as he made his getaway. The perfect crime. Or was it? Now, as is customary in hunting circles, people will often leave a plan for loved ones of where they are headed, how long they expect to be, and any contact information that could be available in that area should somebody need to contact them while they're away. Now, these, what are called security contingency briefs, often allow law enforcement a good start line when it comes to timeframes for the commencement of investigations, should that ever, as in this case, be required. Given that Mingy and McLemore were 2 days late returning from their trip, mixed with the notoriety of the region in which they'd indicated as their intended destination, a search party was sent out. And sadly, it wasn't too long before their bodies were found. As the supervisor of the two men at work, a man by the name of F.A. Wright was leading the hunt. Apart from being their direct supervisor at their location of employment, he was also the head of the Federal Agricultural Bureau in Bay St. Louis. Now, the scene that greeted the search party was one of utter carnage. The shotgun with which the men had been targeted with had duly painted the surrounded woodlands with both brain matter and intestinal contents. Both men were the recipients of ghastly wounds to their heads and abdomens. Evidence from the bodies in the immediate instance was the fact that Mingy's heavy coat was missing, as were the high-topped boots he'd been wearing when he set out for the trip from their base in Picayune. McLemore's body had also been the target of the assailant, who had made off with his automatic pistol and a gold watch. Upon immediate inspection of the crime scene, footprints that were thought to be those of the assailant led investigators to a large oak tree, behind the trunk of which they found 2 spent 12-gauge shotgun cartridges. Additionally, it was noted that the tyre tracks of the men's vehicles led to the Pearl River, from where it had then been driven in an easterly direction, and thus pointed to the obvious place for law enforcement to start their investigations, Hancock County. Angered by the murders, the news of which quickly spread around the town of Picayune, a mob formed, a mob baying for the blood of the unknown killer or killers. The ranks of this mob were swelled as farmers who had been helped by both the slain men to rid their crops of sweet potato weevils joined in. While few in numbers, the law-abiding citizens of Honey Island were quick to suggest one culprit as an infamous inhabitant of the region, a man by the name of Doc Jackson. One resident is said to have proclaimed, "Shooting men from behind a tree is just like Doc." "Let's find him and lynch him," screamed another. And thus the posse set off in search of their prey. Now, with the reputation that preceded him, Doc Jackson was one inhabitant of Honey Island swamp that most people preferred to stay well away from. Numerous stories of him enacting vicious revenge on anyone who crossed his path were rife in the area. Jackson was known to have slaughtered livestock, burned families out of their homes, tortured family members in front of their siblings or parents, as well as numerous other such acts. Of all the stories about him, though, there were 3 that stood out. Firstly, there was an episode with a widow by the name of Emmeline Pearson, who, over a supposed debt that had existed between her deceased husband and Jackson, didn't survive to tell the tale. Her body was found a day after their discussion, to which Jackson explained away as an accident, saying that at some point during their meeting, a pistol had fallen from the table, sending a .44 slug through the stricken widow's heart. Now, a second tale surrounded the death of another citizen of the area, a man by the name of Henry Bennett. An innocent and law-abiding man, Bennett had been killed as he drove along a deserted road which ran along the side of the Pearl River. Now, it seemed that somebody had, for no reason, taken a potshot at the car as it passed. And there was one informant who, for obvious reasons, wished to remain anonymous, but who stated quite categorically that he had seen Jackson heading into that immediate area prior to Bennett being slain. The third tale revolved around an unnamed black man who was found with a fatal head wound after he and Jackson were said to have had words about a situation that Jackson was said not to have been too happy with. Given that it seemed the murderer had fled into Hancock County, a posse was formed by the sheriff at the time, a no-nonsense man by the name of Joe Bontemps. Taking his posse with him, Bontemps instructed the men to start from the scene of the crime within the Honey Island swamp and fan out from there. And fan out they did. Their hunt for Jackson ranged throughout the 250 square miles that the Honey Island swamp covers, from the shores of Lake Borgne all the way to the south to the Gulf of Mexico. Sadly, the posse had little success in the immediate area. FBI agents E.L. Osborne and E.P. Amos would also eventually be tasked to the posse, given that the victims, Mingy and McLemore, were indeed federal employees. It was only then, with the added federal scope and reach available to them, that the posse started to make some headway. Word soon came back that the truck used by the 2 men was eventually found ditched by the side of the road near the town of Hattiesburg in Mississippi, about 70 miles south of the town of Picayune. And the truck had been found by a local law enforcement officer by the name of Officer J.E. Wassegale. Sent to retrieve the truck and dust it for fingerprints, the 2 FBI agents, Osborne and Amos, were sent to Hattiesburg. Wassegale had initially been stopped by the driver of the truck, who had asked him about directions to a local hotel. The vehicle was then subsequently found later again by the same officer, ditched by the side of the road. And on questioning to get a better description of the driver, Wassegale went on to describe a man with long black hair wearing knee-length Mackinac-style boots. When the truck was also searched, the 2 agents found a burlap sack. It contained the stolen automatic pistol of John McLemore. Driving the truck they intended to use as evidence against Jackson, the agents headed south from Hattiesburg to Picayune. Osborne and Amis questioned people along the roadside with the goal of finding someone who may have seen the long-haired driver. Now, they were not successful until they reached McNeil, a small community just to the north of Picayune. Here they questioned the proprietor of a gas station who remembered seeing such a man driving a truck. His description matched that of Doc Jackson. When news of this discovery reached Picayune, citizens talked of having a necktie party with Jackson as the main attraction. Meanwhile, Sheriff Bontemps had continued his investigation and learned from E.R. Roberts, proprietor of the Southern Hotel in Picayune, that he had also found 12-gauge shotgun shells left by a guest in one of his rooms. Mr. Roberts turned this evidence over to the sheriff and the federal agents. Learning that a man named Jesse Favre had signed the register, Sheriff Bontemps ordered Deputy Albert Smith to organise a posse to search Honey Island Swamp, where Favre was said to live. Local residents of the swamp proved to be strangely helpful in giving authorities directions to Favre's cabin, nestled in the deep recesses of the swamp. It seemed they were sick of the heightened attention many of their illicit activities were having to be curtailed for due to the extensive law enforcement presence in the area. Caught unawares, Favre was quickly handcuffed, and a search of the cabin uncovered a gold Elgin watch, a gold fob, and a fountain pen hidden in a pot on the stove. The watch had the name William M. Mingy engraved on the back, and the fob and gold pen were also identified as having belonged to Mingy. Deputy Smith was said to have turned to Favre and snarled, "Well, Favre, looks like we've got you dead to rights. But why did you have to kill them?" Growling like a caged animal, Favre was said to have snapped back, "I didn't kill them, see? Dak Jackson gave me this stuff." And upon further questioning, the authorities learned that Jackson had given Favre the stolen goods as a reward for Favre to hide the truck, which he subsequently did by driving to Hattiesburg and dumping it by the side of the road. Now the question arises, did the description of the driver with long black hair fit both Jackson and Favre? And apparently it did. And so much so, to an extent, that the local citizens of Picayune wanted to lynch either or both men. Knowing the murderous attitude of the citizens, Deputy Smith wanted to get his prisoner in lockup as soon as possible, so he and the other members of the posse loaded Favre into a waiting police car. Before they could return to Hancock Jail, Smith received a message from the sheriff stating that a mob of about 100 Picayune citizens were on their way to lynch Favre. Now, fortunately for the prisoner in this case, a New Orleans-bound train sounded its whistle, and the quick-thinking Smith flagged it down. He boarded with Favre manacled to his wrists with handcuffs, and within an hour, Favre was safely locked away behind bars in the New Orleans police headquarters. Favre was subsequently indicted and brought to trial in February of 1927. Found guilty of the murder of Macklemore, he was given a life sentence. He was not, however, and quite strangely, tried for the murder of Mingy. Nonetheless, the saga does not end there. After his conviction, Favre admitted that he had committed the murders in conjunction with Jackson. Hence, Jackson was subsequently arrested when found and taken to Pearl River County Jail in Poplarville. When word reached Picayune of Jackson's capture and confinement, a mob of about 100 men, infuriated at Favre not being lynched, stormed the jail. Using acetylene torches to burn through the bars, they took Jackson, their prisoner. Now, a caravan of about 25 cars drove southward towards Honey Island Swamp and Pearl River, with the intent to lynch Jackson at the bridge where the murders had taken place. However, the mob were, to an extent, to be disappointed. Along the way, the riotous caravan was stopped at the Bogue Cheto Creek Bridge by a local farmer, who informed them that authorities were in close pursuit. Not to be dissuaded from their murderous intent, one of the mobsters yelled, "Let's do it here! Let's lynch this rat right here from the Bogue Cheto Creek Bridge." Losing all dignity, Jackson had to be dragged kicking and screaming from the car and thrust upon the banister of the bridge. With a rope secured around his neck, and to the taunts of "Jump, you rat, jump" ringing in his ears, the hysterical prisoner was pushed from the railing. Too late for the party, Sheriff Bontemps and his deputies arrived upon the scene to find only the body of Jackson hanging from the improvised gallows with none of the hangmen in sight. Such was the inglorious end of the infamous Doc Jackson of Honey Island Swamp. So there you have it, folks. Never let it be said that a life of crime pays. Now, as always, if you like this story, please be sure to leave a like and a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe and slap the notifications bell so that you'll be updated as and when new content is uploaded by yours truly. Now, if you do also have a specific tale that you'd like me to look into and possibly include on this channel for future content, then please also leave a suggestion for that in the comments below. All that remains is my customary well wishes for you to remain safe, stay sane, and above all, be healthy, and we'll hopefully catch up again sometime soon here on the flip side.